Hello. I'm so sorry, technical difficulties with the first link. It wasn't allowing me to use this camera, which will be really important because it's also the camera that's going to end up looking down at the art that we're going to be creating together. So I'll just wait 2 minutes or so until everyone pops over to this live stream before we get started together. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm so thankful that you're here and that you're going to be doing this with me. I know that you have a very busy day, and we are going to be creating watercolor that you can do in a short amount of time, which is what I'm all about lately. My daughters were here at the table yesterday with me doing their watercolors, and it's so nice to be able to have something that you can do together because it's in a manageable amount of time. So I know that for me, that's really important. So if you're new, my name is Amanda Arneill. And again, I'm so thankful that you are here to do this with me. We're going to just have this 1 minute for everyone to pop over. And you can see that there is a chat on the side of the screen or maybe down below. And please feel free to write your comments or questions in there. I've managed to convince my sister, Alicia, to come here so that she's going to be in the chat, making sure that nothing is missed, that if you have a question and there's a little break in the teaching, she'll read it out loud to me so that everyone can get the answer, or she'll also be typing them into the box. So it's probably maybe gonna show up as my name. It's my sister, Alicia, and she has done the entire watercolor course as well, so she knows exactly what we're going to be covering. Now, all of what I'm teaching you today is based on what I learned from Jeannie Dixon, and she does what I like to call fresh florals because they are florals that don't take a lot of time, that look bright and airy, and that look like a beautiful summer garden. And so we're going to be creating that same sort of thing here today. So again, welcome. Let's get started. I'm just going to move the camera so that you can see, instead of me and my paper towel, you can see down. Oh, that's upside down. There we go. Hold on, these cups are up top. Oh, spatial awareness sometimes really gets me. All right, so we have an example of what we're going to be creating today, and then we have some supplies that you're going to need to create this. Now, first of all, there's a special type of paper that you're going to need. And for this, I'm just using the Canson XL watercolor paper. This is a student grade paper, so it doesn't give you as nice results as a artist grade paper would, but I love to use this student grade paper for when I'm just practicing different buds and blooms, testing things out. Even here I was testing 2 different colors, and there's no sense in using a really expensive paper for this. You can also use the backs of pages. So I like to do color tests on the backs quite often. And let's talk about color next. So I am using, is that mirror imaged? It is. How did that even happen? Let me try refocusing. No. Okay, we're just gonna go with mirror image. I'm gonna look like I'm a lefty, like my kids. So I'm using Mission Gold paints, and all of these that I'm using today are available in a set that I got from Amazon, and I looked on blick.com, so dickblick.com, which is an art store, and they have a great online art supply, and it was $250 for the set that I got. It was $108 on Amazon, and it came with 34 different colors. These 2, Hooker Green, which I can barely say without laughing, Hooker's Green and Sap Green, those are ones that Jeannie also uses very, very often. And then Red Violet and the Permanent Rose are ones that are very similar to other ones that she uses. And I have put them into a palette. So if you don't have these exact same paints, that's totally fine. You're just looking for having 2 different colors of a purplish red and a purple. So let me paint out a little bit. So we have a purple, and we also have this pinkish red. So they're related colors, but not the exact same. And then we have 2 greens, Hooker's Green and and our sap green. And sap green is just a little bit brighter. I always really like the bright colors. Now, I have them put onto a plastic paint palette, and I think I got a set of something like 8 of these for $10 off Amazon. It was super cheap. And well, this is not great because it doesn't have that full lid like you would with a full paint palette. This one's fantastic because it still has this mixing area, and we're only using 4 colors. So these other wells here will allow us to mix some of the paint with the water. So put your paint splotches down onto your palette. If you don't have a palette like this, a flat white plate is a great alternative. You're also going to want some paper towel. Mine's a little bit messy from having used it in the past few days, but I think this is 5 sheets that I've stacked together, because you're going to want to use this a lot to control the amount of water that you have in your brush. So speaking of brushes, I'm using the Silver Black Velvet number 8. And again, this is a great option for getting off of Blick because they have a fantastic sale on these brushes. And these brushes are really nice. It's the round tip brush, ironic because it has a point, but it's nice because they hold a fair amount of water and a good amount of pigment, and they're not crazy expensive on Blick, which is great. They're on sale. They're cheaper at Blick than they are at Amazon. So that's backwards from the paints. Believe me, I'm all about finding the best deal. You're also going to want 3 separate jars, 3 cups of water. And it was like, who's going to have 3 cups measured in 1 jar? But 3 jars of water. One of them is going to be for your warm colors. In our case, that's the reds and the purple. One of them is for your cool colors, which is the green. And then another one is for a clean water wash, because you want to make sure that your paintbrush is completely clean for the blending trick that we're going to be doing in the middle. I'm just going to pull this back a little bit more so you can see a touch more of what I'm going to be working with. All right, let's get started with some painting. I know that no one has a lot of extra time, so let's dive in. I'm going to still use this same rough piece of paper that I've already messed up. I love messing up paper first so that I don't have to worry about messing it up later. That's why I always like to buy used cars. Same sort of theory. And yes, Erin, this will be available as a replay. So don't worry if you have to pop off for some reason. Is that a bad saying? I think that might be a bad saying. That's a bad saying. Okay. Alicia's confirming it is a bad saying. If you have to leave for some reason, because you have to pick up kids or something like that, or get back to work because it's your lunch break, but that's no problem. You will get sent a replay after this. Now, you're going to want to probably, if you could go back in time, put some paint into your wells so that it could dry, because if you're just picking up paint, you're going to go through your paint really quickly. But if you let it dry in your well, then you're going to use less paint and it will be much more cost efficient. So mine isn't completely dry. So you want to pick up a little bit of paint and move it into another well. Oh, sorry for the sniffs, I'm getting a cold. And then add a little bit of water to it. That will help ensure that you're not using up a ton of your expensive paint. And again, we're all about making sure that we are making the best use of our materials. So when you're doing your blending, let's just first focus on the blend that we're going to need to be doing for our bud, because you'll notice in the wreath here that there are the petal portions, and then there's the base of the bud, and then in between there's this blended area. And that blended area is the key to making this entire thing look beautiful rather than having it turn muddy, because red and green, if you remember color theory, those mix together to give gross. That's a technical term for it, but those mix together to give a brownish color. And so we want to create a blend that essentially just has these 2 colors, meeting up in a neutral location. Maybe they're on a first date. So we're going to have our green meeting up with our reddish colors without having them actually blend together. So for your reds and your purples, you're going to want to do something similar to what we did for the green. Make sure you're dipping into your red water jar. where you put a little bit of it into another well so that you're not just using your fully saturated, expensive paint. So what's important, I'm just going to do some green on the bottom and some purple on the top. But when we're doing our blends, you want to make sure, first of all, this is way too watery, that you don't have too much paint. No, that's a lie. You want to have lots of paint, but you don't want to have too much water when you're blending. So not too much water in your green, not too much water in your purple. Having not a ton of water in there will allow you to really control the way that your blend goes. So I've now rinsed off my paintbrush in the purple or red water jar, and then you want to bring it into your clean water jar. Give it one more rinse just to make sure that you got rid of all of the color. Tap off your brush onto your paper towel. That's for two reasons: to get out the extra water from your brush. It's not dry, it's just the extra water, and to double check that your paintbrush is actually clean. Now you're going to go into this in-between zone and just wiggle your brush a little bit. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. And that will start to create a zone where you can blend. And you'll see a little bit of the green shot up. So you're going to wiggle and then pull some of that color out. So this is that neutral area in the middle, right here, boop, 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 where the green is kind of coming in and the purple is kind of coming in, but they're not blending together to create mud. It's this neutral zone. Okay, maybe a library. A library is a good place where they're both joined but not overlapping. There we go. All right. Let's start to make this into a bud. So with your green, you want to first paint out the base of the bud. And this, while it was curved like that, is not really a very good bud shape because it has no definition to it. So pick up a little bit of one of your greens just on the tip of your brush. And I know that when we're doing brush lettering, we often hold our brush pen to the side, but for this, you actually want to hold it quite vertical. You're going to use little lines, just want to make sure my hand's not in the way, little lines to create the suggestion of a bud base. So then down here, it would be into the stem. Now, there are still spaces that are left, and those are key. You want to have those spaces in your bud base and in your florals to make sure that there's breathing room, and also it creates natural highlights in your piece. So now we're going to pick up a little bit of this purple. And again, we don't want it to be too wet, but saturated. And we're going to create one side of our bud. So first we're going to be creating a pretty closed bud. This time the paint is about halfway up the brush. And I'm not filling it up completely with paint because I don't want us to be wasting a lot of paint. We're going to be rinsing our brush a lot. And if you put a ton of paint on your brush and it doesn't all end up on the page, you're just going to be washing it off. The other thing you can do is always put a bit of the extra paint back before you rinse your brush. So let's rinse our brush, dab onto your paper towel, and then head on over to your other red color. Reddish pink. Add a touch of water so that it blends nicely. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't even see my hands in the way. We're adding a touch of water so that it blends nicely. And then we're going to come down here and put a mark that's beside. Put your paintbrush onto the page, wiggle it a little bit so that it's not pointy shaped because there's a point at the end of this brush. And then pull that down ever so slightly on the side. We still have a really big white space in the center. And that's what we want to create that neutral Starbucksy sort of zone. Rinse your paintbrush off once in your red cup, then go to your clean water, and then dab your paintbrush. Oh, see, there was still some pink at the base. So we'll rinse it one more in the clean. There we go, good enough. And then you're gonna go in here and we are going to join in holy matrimony. No. My 7-year-old told me that her and a boy in her dance class have decided that they're in love, which is questionable because they're 7, but you know, whatever. And so they're not married yet, but that's what we're doing here. We're joining them together by wiggling and then removing any of that paint that starts to try to bleed into the other zone. So think of it almost as like personal space. You want to make sure that each of these colors have their own personal space. So do that by wiping your paintbrush off, getting it pretty dry, and then you're going to be lifting up some of that paint. So this would be our first bud. We still have areas of white inside, but those act as highlights. And then we also went through and lifted some of the color. Even I moved up into the purple because that can also create a highlight in the bud. And since the object is rounded here, even if we look at my fingernails, you can see that in a rounded object up towards the top, there are some highlights that happen. And so that's what we're creating here to show that rounded, curved area. All right, let's now take this same idea and we're going to just make it a little bit more open because not every single bud is closed. And also with an open bud, you can cover more area, which is great, especially if you have a limited amount of time and need to get stuff done. So let's start in the same way. Pick up one of your greens. It doesn't really matter which green. So let's get this other one going as well. Pull some into the well. It's still pretty sticky there. So then just pick up a little bit of water with your brush and blend it all together. You can take the extra off your brush just by pulling it on the side of the palette well. And now we'll go in and create that same base shape. So a little cup and pulling down into sort of a stem down here. Now this one's quite bright. So what you can do is go in with some of that, I'll just hold this, with some of the darker green and just touch in one or two spaces with the very tip of your brush to add a little bit of green variety in there. Now we're going to move back to our red. So even after cleaning your brush in the green cup, then clean your brush in the red cup, and that sort of resets your brush with red water in it. So let's pull, here we'll do the red first, pulling a little bit of the red, and we're going to do this same idea where we put our brush down and wiggled it around a little bit. Now I'm a bit concerned about how much water is in my brush. If you're worried if you have too much water in your brush, you can put your brush point down and then give it a shake. And if nothing shakes out, you're probably okay. If a dot of water shakes out, you're going to want to take your brush and just dab it lightly onto your paper towel. The less water you have on the brush, the better you're able to control where the paint goes. So we're going to put our brush down and then wiggle it around, and we're trying to fill out this top area. Now you'll also notice that as I'm putting down the paint and then lifting up my brush, you're going to end up sort of with like an extra charge of paint right where you last touched the page. And we don't really want that in this bleed area here where they're going to be blending together. So you can even push that up towards the outer edge of the petal. Oh, give it a quick rinse. Pretend that never happened. And then go over to your purple color. And you're going to do the same thing on this side. Now, the reason that I like to use two colors like this is because it adds a lot more interest to the bloom. And also when we go to stack them into this wreath, not only is it much more interesting, but it's easier to differentiate between blooms when you have more than one color that you're working with. Now, we're going to clean our brush off completely, even in the clean water. Dab it off onto your paper towel and then do your wiggle. So last time we wiggled with the purple. This time let's wiggle in with the red here. You can choose which color you wiggle with. You can choose maybe to wiggle with both of them even. And then make sure that you, after wiggling, go in and just pick up any color and even think about pushing that white space into a different area. So I'm just going to pull this down as well to visually sort of link it all together by building that a little bit closer to this wiggled blended area in the center. So now we have two different types of blends that we can do. A bud that is tighter, so a little bit more closed, and then more of an open blossom. This sort of reminds me of, what are those called? They always get aphids. It's not snap peas. Those are delicious. No, not a snapdragon. Sugar pea. Is that a flower? Sweet pea, that's it. They remind me of sweet peas, and sweet peas as well are, I need to grow them in my garden, but they always get aphids, so that's why I don't. But they're so nice because they always end up with the most beautiful colors. I also want to go in, I'm noticing this red area is very similar in color the whole way. So with a dry brush, if you notice that you have an area, oh look, it's all this purple, with a completely dry brush, you can just go in, and I like to think of it, I was teaching my kids last night about this, I'm like, it's like a vacuum. In this house, we call it a vacuumator. So it's like a vacuumator where you can just suck up the extra paint you get on there and create a lot more difference in saturation. So let's take what we've learned here and move over into our wreath, because I want to show you how easy it is to put these together to create a full wreath without having to do a ton of practice. I just want to recap one more thing about the blooms here, and that is that when you are putting together your bloom and even the base, you want to use really short, tiny strokes and make sure you have white in between each of them. Even for your buds and blossoms, you can still use these tiny strokes. Keep that white in between so you have an area between where you're going to be meeting. You have your Starbucks, and then you have your petals, and your petals can be, there can be quite a few, but just make sure that you have a little bit of white space between them so that they're not turning into a big smush of petals. That's a technical term, I swear. And then you can go in and create your wiggle and wipe. Oh, that sounds like something that would be perfect for potty training. A wiggle and wipe. All right. So this one, it had a few more little petal areas, but using this wiggle and wipe to create a light zone in the middle helps to tie that all together, and visually it looks like one single bloom. So let's move on to doing our wreath now. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention is that these might look really, really bright, but watercolor as it dries always lightens up. So don't be afraid of making something saturated, but also don't be afraid of pulling away some of the color, pulling it off so that you end up with areas where it's very light and then areas where it's very dark. Okay, we're moving on to our wreath, and I'm not just going to say, boom, here's your wreath. We're actually going to do it. And it shouldn't take us too long. I want to be done this in at least a half an hour with you, and that's including teaching. So that means that this is easily something you can do. First, you want to find a bowl, because heaven help me, anytime I try to draw any sort of circle, it ends up not being a circle. So I like this bowl because I looked at this and thought, perfect, look, it gives me so much space to draw my wreath. But then you need to realize that you're going to be painting not just on the line, but outside of the line. So if you only have 1.5 inches to each side, like I do here, that's not enough. You want to make sure that you find a bowl that gives you, I'd say, at least 2 inches on each side. So using this inner ring of the bowl is a good option as well. Don't just think you have to find a different size bowl. So this one, I think, gives me a full 2 inches. And then you're just lightly going to trace, not all the way around, but just a few marks around the bowl to give you a guideline. Now, really you want to do about 5 marks. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's because 5 is a great number for your wreath. If you do 4, often it ends up looking boxy. If you do 3, it's a triangle. And so 5 gives you this nice curved area. Now, sometimes you can see pencil through paint. So if you're using really light color paints, you probably don't want to have too much pencil, or you just want to make sure as you paint that you first erase the line before you paint in your line. For us, we're going to be using these lines as guidelines for our stems, so we don't have to worry about it too much. Now I'm starting to shift the page because I find that if I'm painting going up and then right over here, sort of away from my body, it's easiest for me rather than trying to come down and go this way. So feel free to turn your page as you need to. You want to start off with your stem. This is sort of going to be, well, not sort of, it is the base of where all of the florals are going to grow. So with just the very tip of your brush, create a super light line. And it doesn't even have to be a fully committed line yet. Mine has still space in between. And that's because we're going to be adding other blooms onto this. So you almost don't want to make it too much like you mean it. Now at the top, this is where we're going to paint our first blossom. And we're going to paint it as a blossom, not just a bud. So put in the, oh, I got a paint drip there. And I put more paint than I wanted, but that's okay because just like we used our paintbrush vacuumator for other things, we can do it here too. I'll suck up some of that paint and that way there'll be some darker and lighter areas even within this stem. And that's always important because it gives you so much more variety and so much more interest in your painting. There we go. All right, once you have some green down, and I was using the darker green for that, but we're going to switch back and forth, so don't feel like it's just one or the other. But now we're going to move on to our reds. So pulling some red into this second, oh, that was a lot. See, that is a ton of paint. So make sure that you're adding enough water that you're not going to use up lots of your paint at once. I've been painting quite a few pieces and I had filled up these wells probably full. It was about, I'd say, a third of one of these tubes, and I haven't even used up even close to half of what's in the well. So as long as your wells are dry, you'll use up much less paint. Okay, now less talking, Amanda, start painting. I don't want this green to dry. So we're gonna do this one as a nice full bloom. So wiggle that brush and get a few petals going in there. I need to turn it a little bit more. And then clean off and pick up some of your purple. And again, I feel like my brush is quite wet, so I'm not going to test on the wreath, but just tap a little bit into your paper towel. You can always tap the base of it where you have less color, and that will take the water out, but leave a lot of your paint inside your brush, so you're not wasting any of your paint. All right, once you have them laid down, rinse your brush in your red, bring it to your clean water, dry it off, and then create your connection. So I'm going to wiggle this one sort of in that middle area, clean the brush off, and then start to lift that blend. So wiggle and wipe. And then we have our first petal already. We can always, as long as it's not dry, go back. Did a bird just hit my window? Yes. Oh, that's so sad. We can always go back and lift up more color, but once it dries, you're out of luck with that. So make sure that you get it as light and bright as possible, or as light and bright as you want it. So each stem, we're going to work this way. We're going to paint one at the top, and then we're going to bring two offshoots. So let's do one offshoot here. And again, just sketch in your stem coming off, and then at the top of that, you're going to sketch in your base of your bloom. And we'll put another one here. And I like to do two at a time just because then you have to wash your brush less. And it's always for me about how can I make sure that I'm not wasting any paint. So getting some purple, try not to have too much water on your brush. And then you're going to place your purple with some blooms and your red on the other side. So each single bloom, you want to do a little bit of red and a little bit of purple. And then they end up blending together when you do this meet up mix in the middle. So I actually want to fluff that out a little, and then we'll do this meet up, wiggle, and wipe. And now this one, before it dries, you don't have to keep the red just on one side. You can shift it from side to side, but you just want to make sure that each of your blooms looks distinct. Now this one had way too much water. I can tell because it looks like a puddle. So if that happens, you want to pick it up, use more saturated paint to charge the edge of it, and then go in and do your wiggle. If you had just water there, the paint, like that red did, would explode down that line and you'll have much less control. And even though we're doing this quickly, you still want to have control over where your paint goes and how your piece blends together. So now we're going to start on our next bud set here, our next stalk. Again, picking up a green. You can even pick up a little bit of both of them. Just lightly go along that line and paint the top. Now, after we go through and paint all around the circle, then we're going to look at how we can fill in some of the spaces, because you might notice that there's still quite a bit of space here. And that's something you want to do at the end when you have a better idea of how it looks together overall. You don't want to just jump into that and maybe end up overweighting, not a word, overloading one area with too many buds or too many petals. You want to make sure that it's looking balanced overall. So those two started to blend together. So just make sure that you're picking up, wiping onto your paper towel, and continuing to pick up that paint so that you have control over your blend. You can even wash off your brush to get just clean water in there and continue to pick it up. So now let's do 2 more offshoots, and you can see you start to move through this pretty quickly because you're not worrying about it looking absolutely perfect, and you're worrying more about working quickly so that you can be blending quickly. Let's do one here off this side, and we'll do another one. Let's do it down lower this time. Oh, this time, and that's exactly what we did there. That's okay. We're going to do 2 at a time here. So first our purple. Let's put it on this side over here. Well, it's a big bud. And then this one, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. We want to be able to leave a little bit of space in the center so you can put something else in there. So making sure that it's not too big will help with that. Okay, getting a little bit more red. And we'll place a touch of it in here. I'm even going to put some on the outside here and making this into a more closed bud. Because we're working pretty quickly, you can go through and blend both of these at the same time. If you're working more slowly, then you don't want to do 2 at a time because it's very likely that part of it will dry before you can get to it. And that's definitely not what we want. So I'm even extending a bit of this green just to make it look like, yes, it can actually hold this entire bloom that we've done here. Now, when you look at this, you can probably see that we have a huge open space here, and that's definitely too big for a leaf. So that's an opportunity to put another bloom. Let's just do a tiny one down here. I'm going to charge it with a little bit more of this darker green so that there's some variety in the base, and pull it all the way down. And then do a tiny bud. I still like to add sort of these little bits coming off so that it's almost like it's working on opening. If they're all super tight, they start to look repetitive and your wreath won't look alive. It'll just look like a wreath of buds. And wiggle and wipe. That one ended up blending together really nicely. The really nice thing about using 2 different greens is that you'll end up with different types of blends in between the 2 colors. The lighter sap green gives this bright yellowish, and then this one gives sort of a more muted green, but they look so nice together. And that's also why sometimes I like to charge the line with the other type of green as well, so that they're both mixed in there. All right, we're on to our next line, and we're just going to keep repeating that until we get all the way to the end. If I was Martha Stewart, I would have a cake already baked in the oven, but definitely no Martha Stewart. I've also never gone to jail, so that's good. So we'll do 1, and you know what? Let's do all 3 of them right away. And this one I think is just going to be smaller because it doesn't have a ton of space in here. Whew, now it's like racing against the clock. I was watching repeats of what is $100,000 pyramid. And I know, I'm cool like that. And they were racing against the clock, and you'd think she only had one more thing to get and 18 seconds to get it, and she just could not for the life of her. And that's kind of what I feel like right now, except there's not $100,000 at stake. Good times. Old game shows. All right, so here, now we have to blend. Make sure that your brush is clean, and I'm starting to lose clean space on my paper towels, so I'm gonna have to change that over as well. Getting that nice wiggle and wipe happening. Now the edges here look quite hard, so you can even come and soften some of those petal edges up. That's much better, I think. Just pay attention to that. If it doesn't look natural, you want to fix it. And we're not trying to make them look perfect, which is really nice. We're just trying to give that suggestion of a bud, and then all together it ends up being so beautiful. All right, let's do our next two quick like that too. I'm gonna grab some new paper towel. I feel like with the amount of paper towel I've used lately, I should invest in a paper towel company. Paper towel stock, perhaps, if you will. And let's grab some more of our greens. I'm gonna grab both of them and paint up. Now, on our first one here, there's a lot of empty space at the base, which is perfect because we're gonna have to paint an item that goes right up into there with a bloom, and making sure that we have lots of space to work in will be super helpful to make sure that you can't tell where our wreath started and where it ended. So we've got 3 going on. Move over into the reds. And let's wiggle out one bloom, put a second one, and make sure that you're not just using the paint that you have on your brush every time, because as you use it up, it'll get lighter and lighter. And remember that your watercolor paint lightens as it dries. So you want to make sure that you have enough saturation there that it's still bright and vibrant and absolutely beautiful. And we'll put a little bit there. Oh, and then into the clean water. Now this right now is my clean water. It's a little bit pink, but it's definitely better than my actual pink water, which is kind of gross. You do want to, as you're creating these, change your water when it starts to get, it starts to lack transparency. So if you can't see through your water anymore, even a little bit, then you definitely want to go and change it up. So the wiggle and wipe, and then look to see if it needs a little something. I feel like it could, but I'm not 100% sure. So let's do our last stem in here. And we're going to be doing it still pretty light so that we can build off of it and have this guy coming up here. So I'm planning how it's going to sort of overlap this one a little bit, but not take over the space. And this guy, we'll put him really low. I don't know why my paintings are boys, but we'll just go with it. Let's add in some of that brighter green up towards the top so we can get some yellow blending happening. And then move on to adding in our reds. And again, we're trying to do 3, so we're working pretty quickly. Make sure, oh, look at how much water's in there. So just wipe a little bit off. Make sure you don't have too much water in your brush, and that when you're adding here, you're still keeping those white highlight areas. They're so important. You can also make sure, like I'm noticing here, this red is very even, which I don't love. So as long as it's still wet, you can always go back in and push that color around a little bit and make it look a little more varied by changing the saturation. Okay, so we've got our reds. Don't get distracted, Amanda. Something shiny. And let's move over here to our purples. So as we're finishing up this bit, let me know if you have any questions about this that I can help you with. And then we're going to move on to our final, final touches just to finish this off. Make sure it's all complete and full. Look for ways to ensure that it all ties together well, because I think that's really important whenever you're creating something. It's like that finishing touch of putting on lipstick. I say that, but most of the time don't. But it's that finishing touch of just making sure that you've covered all your bases, dotted your I's, crossed your T's, all those other cliche sort of comments. Okay, so looking at this now, let's look at it overall. I am noticing that this area looks relatively full. Then we have less full right here, less full right here, and maybe less full here. So those are perfect places for small buds. You can just go around and add a few of those in, and they can even be very close into the base. So let's do one here, and we'll do another little guy right in here, or girl. Now we're not trying to create more full florals. We're just adding a little bit more so that it feels like it's complete, almost like you feel like you've walked into a wall of flowers in a good way, Okay, so we've put in some purples. Let's put in some reds, and you want to do this step by step. Like I kind of feel like there could be another one over here, but doing a little bit at a time will allow you to have a lot of control over where you're adding things and how it looks overall. So that one, you can see there was a lot of water in the paint, which meant that I had less control over the blending that happened. So that's why I have been saying, make sure that you have less water. Where's the other one? There it is. Make sure that you don't have a ton of water either in your brush or in your paint, because it will give you much more control if you are on top of that. So here I ended up with a little water bloom outside. I'm just going to cover that up by adding some paint there so that it looks like it was actually a tiny petal, and all intentional. Okay, looking at it again. Where is this space? I feel like right there. We still need a little something. So let's put one more, and then we're going to move on to our leaves. And the leaves are going to be quick and easy, but they really make a big difference in how this looks overall. One final guy or girl. Tiny baby. Okay. So of course we did this with this reddish pink and purpley pink. And those two are nice because they are related. So for instance, here where they've blended together, it creates a really beautiful soft blend, and it also looks natural. You can create this with any two colors. Just make sure that they are similar and somewhat related so that they look like they belong together. And that's really important in making sure that it all ties together and visually flows. All right, we're going to be looking at leaves now. So I'm going to pull back our first piece of testing paper and show you the most simple leaf that you can do. And it's perfect with this brush. I'm going to use the brighter green for it because I feel like overall this has a lot of darkness to it. Not like scary darkness, like the basement darkness, but just it's quite saturated. So bringing in the bright green can be a nice alternative to it. So you want to make use of your paintbrush. It has a pointy top and then a wider base. And even if you do that, you end up with something that's leaf-like, but it's a little too rounded on the end. So instead you want to put your paintbrush down, you put in a little bit of pressure and then lift up and keep going. And that will also give you that stem for your leaf that can connect into your larger stem. Again, because that can end up being very monochromatic, yeah. You want to take a clean brush and just go in and vacuumator a little bit of it so that you have some variation inside and around your leaf. Another thing that you can do too is take some, sorry if that was a loud tap, take some of your darker green, and you can even go in and put some of that in there at the top or at the bottom, again, to give that variety. But that's if you want to, you don't have to. Let's go in and finish this guy off with some light, bright green leaves. So again, just picking up a little bit of that green. You can see I'm not scooping, I'm just sort of tapping on it, and that loads up your paintbrush with green. Pull up what we've got here. I just added a little bit more water to reactivate it. And make sure that you're saturated in your brush with paint, but not with water. And all of these empty spaces, you're just gonna go in and put these tiny little leaves in there. And it will definitely help to turn your page as you go. Just look for any area that's open and that looks like it is begging for a little teeny something to go in there. Some of your leaves can be small, some of them can be larger. You don't have to have them meet up all the way to the base because the viewer's eye will automatically assume that it's going down and meeting in with the stem, and that's just part that they can't see. So don't worry about that. And we'll do one here. But the lightness that this green gives is just so beautiful. I feel like I want one more green over there. And now we have our wreath. It was super simple and super quick. And this is something that I created from one of the techniques, one of the lessons that Jeannie Dixon teaches in our brand new course that's launching today called Fresh Watercolor Florals. And the technique that she teaches is this blending for the bud. She teaches how to make buds. I'll show you her piece that she taught with. Oh, let's see if I can even get it all in here. So it's a variation of this type of bud and then a variation of this type of leaf, and taking this single, this wasn't even a full lesson, this is just a portion of a lesson. That's how we came up with this beautiful wreath here. So even just from this, probably like 3 minutes in this, it allowed me to create this entire wreath, which is perfect because I need to have a little wreath for a wedding invitation that I'm designing. And there we go, there it is. Now, there are other types of buds that Jeannie also teaches. So ones like this that are along a stalk, which we sort of incorporated here. And then these hard and soft blooms, which are beautiful. And just showing you a little bit more about the full course, these are some of the leaves that she teaches, and then even goes into like berries and rosemary sprigs. But there's so much variety that you're able to get a great sense not only of a single project that you're able to do, but also different ways to put it together, just like that wreath, so that you can combine it all and make your own pieces. Next in the course, well, she not only goes through that, but also we teach basic strokes, like the ones that we were using here for the blooms, so that you're able to add and remove paint as needed. Then there are specific flowers. She does at least 12 different flowers and teaches 12 different leaf styles throughout the course. Peony, you gotta love it. And then we move on to teaching bouquets. That was a cool bouquet and a warm bouquet, and painting within a shape. And then also a full page of florals. I want this on my wall so bad. Painting florals mixed with words, and finishing it off with this beautiful crest, which she actually created a few of these and then gave them to her kids' teachers with their monogram inside as a year-end gift. And I was a teacher for 10 years. I got way too many candles. This is something that you would cherish ever. Now, because the course is launching today and you spent time with me here, I want to make sure that you get more than anyone else. Is that bad to say? I don't think so. So I'm going to be doing a launch giveaway, which has 2 different prizes. actually 10. So 5 people are going to, who register within this week, are going to get a gift certificate, a $50 gift certificate to Blick, so that you can buy some of these beautiful paintbrushes and some of the paints and help with that. And then 5 people are going to get a, well, it's their choice of book. There are 2 beautiful resource books that Jeannie has in the course, and you're going to get to pick which of those 2 books you'd like to have. So 5 people will get that. And because you are here with me, I'm going to give you an opportunity to get extra entries into the draw to me because you're the best. So if you are registered in the course to get all of the instruction and continue to do all of the beautiful, what are these projects that come with the course, you'll also get 2 entries into the giveaway. So rather than just the single entry, you will get 2. And you know what? I misspoke. I said that it's going to be going all week, but it's only going to be going for a few days. Now, anyone who registers before 5 o'clock, I don't know why you're just looking at my hands. Oh, there I am sideways. That's fun. Oh, upside down. Ooh. Anyone who registers before 5 o'clock is going to get 2 entries into that, so that you don't just get the single entry, you get a little something extra. I would like to say thank you so much for joining me for this project. Again, this is just a small, something that I came up with from a small portion of what Jeannie taught. And I think that the thing, okay, let's just have some real talk here. I'm not by any means a watercolor artist. I do not consider myself a watercolor artist, but I want to be able to do it. And that's what I felt that her course let me do. But it doesn't take a lot of time to do projects like this with her style. And it also doesn't take a lot of, is this weird to say a lot of skill? Because it's just simple techniques that you can put together, and then you can put them together in different ways. Because I've taken so many courses where it's like, once they show you one project, that's all you can do with it. They don't really show you how to apply it, or you don't feel you have skills that you can then go out and make your own. But this course really, she'll teach you how to do these different things, but then we're also teaching you all of the different florals so that you can mix and match them in the way that you would like, or create a quick bud wreath. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we covered in the course or live lesson? Okay, so Alicia, are there any, can you just read it to me?
Yes, Nadia had a good question. She says, is this class going to focus on more detailed flowers than your previous watercolor class?
Yes. Well, and let me, like, all the sheets that I was holding up, these are the actual, there we go. Just smush it into my face. These are the actual pieces that Jeannie creates. And I always like to learn from the instructors that I have come through, because why not? And I actually managed to create a piece that looked like this, which was amazing for me. So there are styles that are looser and more interpretive, if you will, like this guy up here, this hard and soft floral. But then there's also the more specific peonies and the black-eyed Susans. And it's not that realistic type of painting that's going to take you forever, but it's floral painting that you'll be able to fill a page, make it look like the floral, and do it quickly, which is key, I think, for me. Can you explain the difference between 2 classes, Erin? So the first one had a lot of lettering as well. This one doesn't have any lettering. It's just painting, and it's Jeannie's style like this. So this one's also hers, where it's these loose, large florals that fill a page and that are really bright on the page, where you're looking at putting together the different colors, how you can charge color, how you can remove color to create the natural highlights. And it's teaching her style. So that's very, very different than any other style that I've seen. And it's different than that, the rose, you know, like the style where it's the rose, where it's those little lines, and then you just sort of do smushes together outside. Her rose looks much more rose-like than most of the watercolor roses that are out there. So that's very much how it is different than the other one. And it's very like, it's just very bright and vibrant, and it's her style. So this is one project that we do at the end. This is another project. We go specifically through 8 flowers in their individual lessons. And then she also teaches flowers within these projects. So the Black-Eyed Susan comes during the crest lesson. And which one comes? I know that there was one in this. Oh, the open daisies come in the joy lesson. And so there are so many different florals that you learn that you could then mix and match together. And like I said, all of these are florals directly from the lessons. I got to keep them all. This one's the anemone. So it's nice too, because she talks about lots of different ways to create your foliage and different petal shapes, but also different centers. So you can sort of mix and match, because there are so many flowers out there that you can always mix and match these guys together. Figure out where to blend. Oh, so Francis, you're saying, can you explain how to figure out where to blend? So one of the big things is you want to have at least like a pinky space based on how big your painting is. Like each bud should be about 1 inch. So that's 3 pinky spaces, or maybe pinky nail spaces. And pinky nail space should be your color of purple or red or whatever. 1 pinky nail space is the base, and then you should have at least a pinky nail space in between where it's just white. That's also, how convenient, about the width of your brush, so that you can put your brush down and your brush will be mostly just in the white space. Then when you wiggle it, you'll activate the purple on the top, you'll activate the green on the bottom, and they'll sort of dance a little bit into the middle, but then you'll fight them back. And so they just sort of mix in that neutral zone there, but that zone should still remain white. Let's look back at this one here. It's sideways, but that's not a problem. In here, this one specifically, we have area where purple's dancing down. We have an area where the green's dancing up. There's still, you can see where the two meet, but don't mix. And then over here, we left it completely white. You don't want to blend out everything in between. You usually want to pick one side or the other or the middle to blend out. Oh, part of that was still wet. So for instance, this one here, we did blend out both, but we have this white space nice and close to the base. And you still have this white-ish that's happening in the middle. So make sure these two are a bit close. That's why they come very suddenly together, but make sure that you have at least your brush width at the base separate in between for doing your blending. All right, hopefully that helped. Let's see. Does she explain in detail? Yes, yeah, we go through step by step so many of the different blooms. I also am in there quite a bit doing a few, not quite a bit, you don't want to see this too much, but doing a few of the lessons and making sure that you know what to focus on. As well, the handout package for this course, it's 99 pages. So it's essentially an entire book that goes with the course that has your step-by-steps. It also has then like the different florals with notes as to what you should watch out for in each area, things to think about as you're creating them. It's a lot. It's 99 pages long. So there is more than enough material for you in this course to make sure that you are able to fully, I was going to say nail your blooms, but I don't think that's right. I always think if this was a hashtag, would it get shadow banned? And I feel like that one would, so it's probably bad. So there's a lot in there. Struggling to find the balance between applying my paint too dry or too watery. Okay, So with the, I don't think I have any comments on how loosely I hold my brush. All right. I think paper towel is probably the key with, let's get back down here, with making sure that your brush is the perfect amount of wetness. And this is definitely something that we go over in the course as well. And when you have a full brush that's dripping, you're not able to control your brush at all. You want to make sure that you have a mix that looks not transparent, but is also able to be moved around your well very easily. So this is a good mix. If it was, I'm just gonna add a bunch more water. If it was like this, and it's not blending up the sides at all, oh yeah, that's helpful. You can't see. If it was like this one, and it's not blending up the sides at all, it's all just coming back into the center, that's because it's a water drop. It doesn't have enough paint in it. And then if you have one like this where it's just all paint, then it's just all paint. So that's not enough. So to your water, you could start to add more paint until it starts to work its way, there we go, up the side of the well and doesn't fall right back down into a dot. So it's coming back in together because it's still water, but it's not coming into like a raindrop that you could roll, or a mercury drop, there you go, that's safe, that you could roll around on your hand. That way you'll have, now I have way too much water on my brush from that. You can dab off, and that way you'll have paint on your brush that you can control, but not too much water. And then you can go in and always lift areas up or wiggle to blend some of it out. Okay. Is it possible to use pan colors? Pan colors are just a little bit trickier because you can't pull them out in the same way and get them quite as thick or saturated in the same way as your tube colors. And I know some people say that pan colors last a lot longer than tube colors, but tube colors, if you put them into your palette and then let dry, you can still make these sorts of mixes where it has the same consistency and it really gets nice and saturated, but you won't use too much of it up. So you just want to make sure that you put them into your palette and let them dry for at least 24 hours before you start to use them. All right, we have, well, now I can't see how long we've been going. I think we only have 3 more minutes. Let's get, are there any, Alicia, do you see any final questions? Because we were supposed to end at 1 hour and we're now 3 minutes over.
I think you put them all.
Got them. Any last questions? Oh, just got very close to the camera there. I apologize for that. I try to avoid getting too close. So, and I still sometimes play with pan colors, but often you won't get the same vibrant colors and they won't be quite as saturated because even when you dry tube colors, they're different than when you have a pan color. They're still, they're a lot more saturated. There's not the air inside there. There's not the same fillers, also because these are artist grade paints. And I know artist grade paints are expensive, but they'll give you brighter colors. They give you better transparency. And if you use them by drying them out in your palette, then they actually last a really long time. So that's why I like to push these, not because I'm a pusher. Oh my goodness, so many wrong things. I want to make sure, see, I started out with watercolors that were just like the student grade, and you're still spending a fair amount of money on your student grade watercolors, but then they just didn't give me the results I was looking for. And as soon as I tried the artist watercolors, it all made sense because there's not filler in these and you can get way better saturation and also way better transparency. So your extremes are more, which means that you can actually get more colors out of one tube because you have the darkest saturation, you have a lighter saturation, you have a lighter saturation still, you have a lighter saturation, you have the very lightest saturation. It just gives you such a variety. Art. I have not been watching Netflix Drug Lords, but now I'm intrigued. So I hope you have a fantastic day. Remember, if you want to get your name in for getting the extra chance at winning the entries for the $50 gift cards, or there are 5 of them, or the 5 books, then make sure you get it in before 5. Look at how 5 and 5 before 5, and that will get you extra entries. So if you're thinking about it, make sure that you hop in there quick so that you have a better chance than anyone else. If you missed the beginning of this, you can always watch it on the replay, and that will be available for you because you signed up for a limited time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you make your own beautiful floral wreaths very soon. Have a great day.